Pete, this is so much fun. Thanks for playing Prime Climb with me. Ever since I bought this game, I've been wanting to play it with you.
Oh, sure. This is a great game. All right. A 6 and a 1. So this pawn is on 2. So I'm going to multiply by the 6 and move it to 12. And this other pawn is on 24. Okay. I'm going to subtract the 1 and move back to 23. So I get a prime card. All right. Your turn. Okay. I got a 2 and a 5. What can I do? Oh, get this. I'm going to take my pawn that's on 36 and divide by the 2 to move it back to 18. Then I'll add the 5 to land on 23, bumping you all the way back to 0 and getting a prime card myself. Dang, that's brutal. Nice move. Hey, by the way, did I ever tell you that I went to grad school with one of the co-creators of this game?
You did? No way. I can't believe it.
Yeah, see, it says right here on the box. Dan Finkel.
That's so awesome. Hey, you know what? We should totally have him on the show sometime.
Hey, guys.
Hey, who are you?
Hey, it's Dan. How's it going?
Oh, it's great. How are you guys?
Awesome. Thank you so much for dropping by. No, this is Dan Finkel. He is the co-creator of Prime Climb, the founder of Math for Love, and all-around excellent human being.
Oh, hey, nice to meet you, Dan. Thanks so much for being here. We were just talking about you. Do you happen to have some time for a little math club chat?
Sure.
Awesome. So we definitely want to talk to you about Math for Love, but first we've got to talk about Prime Climb. I came across it one day when I was browsing the game shop at Target, and I thought this would be a really fun game to play with my son, who was in middle school at the time. So can you give us a little overview of the game, like how you came up with it, how it's played, stuff like that?
Yeah, I was in a mode where I was dreaming up a lot of games to play with kids of different ages. And at the same time, I was thinking about prime numbers a lot. And there's this idea of coloring the prime numbers and the cool visual that could give you. And I don't know, somehow the idea just came to me of a race game that combined all those elements, and then it took like 13 more months to hammer out all the details to actually make it perfect in the way we wanted it to be. But we were looking for a game that would be as simple as some of the classics like Sorry and Parcheesi and Chutes and Ladders, and have those elements if you're trying to get somewhere first, but that would use math as the main engine of the game and include a really clear visual about how multiplication and division actually works. You could just see that in the color.
Do you mind explaining just a little bit how the gameplay mechanic works?
Yeah. So you have 2 pawns you're trying to get from 0 to 101 in the main game. And you roll 2 dice, which are 10-sided dice. So they go from 1 to 10. And you'll roll these 2 numbers, and you get to apply them one by one to your pawns. You get to add, subtract, multiply, or divide as you like, in whatever order you like, to whichever pawn you want to. So you can apply them both to the same pawn or to different pawns. So if I roll a 3 and a 9 and I'm on 7, I could multiply my pawn by 9 and go to 63 and then add 3. But I could also add the 3 and go to 10 and then multiply times 9 and go to 90. So that's the main gameplay. The other pieces are, if you land on a red prime, a prime greater than 10, you get to draw an action card or a prime card, which gives you special powers, which typically end up really helping you to win the game, to get up to 101 exactly, and also to be able to mess with your opponent sometimes. And then you can also bump your opponent back to 0 if you land on them exactly.
Cool. And I love that it was driven by this visual of, what if we used colors and the primes themselves were different colors, and that showed up in some important and beautiful way in the game. And I would say when my son and I were first playing it, the color was definitely the first thing that stood out as being really, uniquely awesome about this game. Can you kind of describe what you did with the colors there?
Yeah, the mathematics is very old. It's from something called the fundamental theorem of arithmetic, which says that you can break any number down into prime factors And the prime factors give a unique address, unique description of that number based on their product. But the visual idea is if you color the prime numbers, then each number has a unique color address given by how those multiply together. So for example, 2 we made orange, 3 we made green, 5 we made blue, and 7 we made purple. Every other prime number we made red because that was all we needed to never have 2 red primes interacting on the board. And if you take something like 14, which is 2 times 7, that's orange and purple. You want to multiply that times 3, which is green. You say, oh, what's 3 times 14? Well, I might do that and say, oh, I can figure out that that's 42. But if I look at the colors, it turns out that combining the colors gives me the address for 42. So 42 is orange, green, and purple, which is exactly the combination of those colors that I put together from 14 and 3.
Yeah, it's really a genius because I told you I was playing this with my son at the time. He was in middle school, and so he had his arithmetic down, but what was cool was he could look at his pawn on a certain number and know that it was divisible by a smaller number if that smaller number's color was included in the larger number's color palette. So if he was on 42, he knew if he divided it by 3, he would just take away one of those greens and then look to see what number had the remaining colors, and it would be 14. And that was really cool.
We actually have a variation of the game that you should try playing sometimes where you start at 101 and try to get to 0 first.
We usually play the there and back again revision.
Totally.
You start at 0 and go up to 101 and then all the way back.
Yeah.
But we decided when you're on your way back that some of those action cards, you have to kind of take their reverse, or else the ones that are supposed to hurt you become helpers and vice versa.
No, you've done exactly what we pictured with the game, which is that's exactly how that variation is supposed to work. And yeah, like always we want to say like change the rules so they make sense and like make that adjustment. Yeah, totally.
Do you have a sense for where's the sweet spot in terms of age of players? Is it best for like Noah's son in middle school? Is it best for high school, for adults? Where do you like to see it?
What I usually say is age 10 and up, and younger kids can play it with help, but starting 4th or 5th grade and then all the way up, I think is really nice. And one of the things that, this is true when it comes to anything educational, but anything that I ask students to, I want to also enjoy myself, but I will play for a while and I'll come back to it. And I feel like, okay, I actually still enjoy this. And I feel like this is a good game for adults too.
Dan, I have a question for you. Usually you're sitting there playing a board game and you develop a strategy and you never have the opportunity I have right now to talk to the person who developed the game.
Yeah.
But my son and I have sort of come to the conclusion that the middle of the board is kind of the dead zone where you never really want to end up. You don't really want to end up in like the 50s through the 70s or so. Is that what you find, or is that what most players find, that that's sort of a danger zone to land in?
Yes, that definitely tends to be true. The space where you can no longer multiply and stay on the board is a danger zone. And in general, if you're playing with 2 players, there's kind of this sweet spot from maybe 10 to 25 where you have a lot of opportunities to multiply and go up a lot. But if you're playing with 4 players, it can kind of be a melee and you can just get bumped back a lot if you're hanging around in that area. So you sometimes have to edge up higher into the 30s or 40s just to have enough space. But yeah, one of the cards sends any pawn to 64, and that is a move that beginners will use for their own pawns and advanced players will use for their opponents, because 64 tends to not be a place that you want to hang around. On the other hand, every once in a while you get a roll, like you get a 2 and a 3, and you divide by 2 and you're at 32, and you multiply times 3 and you're at 96, and suddenly you're right in the game. So
I love that it's 64. It just, on the one hand, it feels so random. Like this card sends you right to 64. And I love the little strategy that you just mentioned. Why not divide by 2 and then multiply by 3? Brilliant. I also love that you referenced the classics. You talked about Sorry and Parcheesi. That certainly is one of them. And I love that you're placing this game kind of on that same grouping. Because it feels like, yeah, I could see it sitting there. Do you want to play Sorry tonight? Do you want to play Prime Climb? What about Parcheesi? It's great. It's got just some really lovely mechanics.
In a way, what we're hoping is that so many of these games involve math in subtle ways, but there's always this sense where you've got to hide the math to have a popular game. And what we're hoping to do is just put the math in the front and make it so clear just how appealing it is, how fun it is.
I love that.
And have that be the classic.
Yeah. Well, it's like you've said in several places, in several channels, math is about play. That's where it begins. It begins with play.
Yeah.
And as, a fellow mathematician, I couldn't possibly agree more. It's really the mode that I'm in when I'm doing math. So putting it right there in front of you, just saying this game is about mathematics. It is a mathematical game. I love it.
Yeah. Thanks so much, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. So
I probably shouldn't tell you this, Dan, but I wanted to play it with Pete. But we live in different states. So I created a version on Scratch, which is an online coding environment, so that Pete and I would be able to play it together.
You know what? You are not the first one to have used one of those things. And someday I'll get my own one out there too. But no, I think it's great that people are using it. And in general, there are people who've made body scale versions of this where they're playing like full size versions where like kids can walk around on the numbers and online versions. And
it's like
I'd
a
love to
labyrinth.
see what people are doing. So.
Yeah, it's like a labyrinth that you could, I could imagine a giant mat. You go down to the park, you roll it out, and you're just playing there, like with human-sized pieces.
Totally.
That is so cool. I did want to ask briefly, how did you get involved with Kickstarter? How did it work for you? What led you there?
When we had the idea for Primetime and really developed it, it was kind of a side project. We had no idea what it would amount to or what it would do. And at the time, I think it was 2014, Kickstarter just seemed like a natural place to go to both to get enough money to do a print run, but also just to see if people would be interested in it. And so it's a little bit of work to put together a Kickstarter campaign, but we made the video and put together the pieces and had all the elements and put it out there. And it just got a lot of attention in a way that surprised us and delighted us. And I can't remember exactly how long it took, but it funded within, some reasonable number of days. I think it was sometime in the first week or something. And I think we ended up a little over triple, maybe what we asked for. Some other board games have done better in the world, but it was a real happy surprise to us that there seemed to be more interest than we originally anticipated in it.
This idea, like you're going to kickstart a game that is about mathematics and you tripled the amount you were asking for and you did it in a week or whatever. That's a great story. I love it.
Yeah, it was a happy surprise. Originally, we were like, we should sell this or give it to a board game company that can figure out how to do it. But we couldn't really figure out how to do that. We pitched to one company, they passed. And we're like, I guess we'll just have to do it on our own. And it's been the most fortunate thing because it's continued to be something that people want. And the total surprise. But that's what happens sometimes.
So Dan, I'm curious about the path that you took after grad school. I know that you and Pete started off in a very similar place by being grad students together, but your careers really branched off in different directions after that. Pete, you took a pretty traditional path right out of grad school, didn't you?
Yeah. So when I finished my degree, I joined the faculty at University of Washington at the Bothell campus and worked as an assistant professor for several years, teaching and trying to move forward with my research. But eventually I decided it wasn't the best fit. So I left and went to Amazon, where I started working as a software engineer.
And Dan, can you tell us a little bit about the different path that you chose to take?
Yeah. Before I went to graduate school, I was a teacher for a few years. And so I'd had a taste of that. And then when I was in graduate school, in addition to teaching the calculus series and some of the other, math classes that graduate students typically teach, I ended up getting a grant that put me in a second grade classroom and a fourth grade classroom in Seattle.
Was this a GK-12 grant?
GK-12 grant. That's right. Yeah.
I had the same grant when I was there.
Oh, so there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe we were even in the same school.
What school? What school were you at? Just
Emerson Elementary in South Seattle.
Okay, I was at Thurgood Marshall, but I know Emerson was one of them. Yeah, I was in grades 2 and 4.
Oh, there you go.
You guys, the question was, how did your paths diverge? Okay.
but I think I started having some clarity that doing just pure mathematical research wasn't quite the right thing for me. And there was this yawning chasm between just the I mean, what you were saying, Pete, about the sense of play and the just thrill and the enjoyment of the math research and of discovering something new versus I would seem like so many people had just had such a negative experience and such, traumatic experience sometimes. And it just felt like we needed to be sharing what was worth loving in mathematics at a much, much younger age. And I graduated in 2010, but I started blogging under the name Math for Love, I think in 2009, I think with some clarity that problem was the problem I wanted to work on.
I totally know what you mean. As an elementary school teacher who's taught third, fourth, and fifth grade, something I was always struck by was how students don't seem to feel any kind of negative stigma saying, oh, I'm awful at math. In fact, even grown-ups don't seem to ever feel like there's anything negative with saying, I hate math. I'm terrible at math. Whereas they would never say, I'm terrible at reading. That there's a definite negative stigma about not being proficient in reading, but people seem to feel like it's okay to not be proficient in math, and that almost they can use that as an excuse to not even try at math. I would notice sometimes.
Yeah. And, and you're talking about the upper elementary grades, and a lot of people pay attention to middle schools, this time when, that's when kids really turn against math or the decision gets made about whether they like math or not. But I just had this feeling that it was way earlier that, you look at 2, 3, 4, 5-year-olds, they just naturally play with math. There's no sense that they shouldn't be doing this or it's okay not to do this. It's just part of their world. And whenever they encounter it, they do it and they enjoy it. Like their instinct is to play. And sometime between, when the kids are 4 and 5-year-old and when they get to 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, they're learning those lessons that, math is something that it's okay not to like, or that math is something that they're just not welcome in. Like I always think about, there's this advice someone gave me once when you're picking a new elementary school for your kid, which is look at the art on the wall. And if all the art looks the same, don't send your kid to that school. Because
I love it.
Instinct, right? That like, yeah, if you're asking kids to do art, they should be creative. And if all the art looks the same, you're not doing what the art needs to do. And yet most of the math we ask kids to do looks exactly the same, no matter who's doing it. There's no place for that creative sensibility, that sense of play. And I just feel like if that can change, then we won't have kids saying this isn't for me. It'll just be like everyone will do it. I think they learn how to read and do other things.
Do you know what I love about this comparison between math and playing? People don't feel like they're playing wrong. That's not a thing, right? Nobody says, oh, I would play, but I'm not very good at it.
Yeah.
You don't, right? That's not, it's a category error, right? To somehow even think that way. But math has become so separated from playing somehow for so many people that it becomes quite natural to say, oh, I'm doing this wrong. I'm not any good at it. This isn't my cup of tea. I mean, I remember students at the university level who were required to take math classes. They would say things just exactly like that. It's never been my best subject. It's not my favorite. Or I'm only here because my major is making me take this class. But when it's playing, if you can bring that play out, then not only does all of that just get set aside, but then it becomes something you want to do. You seek it out because who doesn't like play?
I think if we had to teach everyone to play from scratch, it would be a really hard problem. The beautiful thing is kids come to the subject with an instinct to play with it.
Yeah.
And we get to actually use that momentum rather than try to kind of build it up from nothing.
So how did you go from identifying that problem to creating the Math for Love organization?
Yeah. It was a bunch of small steps that started with blogging my thoughts on it and talking with other people online. And then I did some tutoring, and then I did some classes after school. I worked with the Robinson Center at the University of Washington to launch their Saturday program. So we started doing classes on Saturday, and then we started doing some professional development in connection with that. And then I ended up getting asked to do more and more professional development. At this point, I've worked with many schools in the Seattle area and actually in a much wider area right now. And then Seattle asked us to write their summer intervention curriculum. So then we ended up writing a curriculum and at the same time developing more games. And it just was a bunch of small steps until now each thing seems like it has a certain amount of life of its own. And, I'm not tutoring or doing those classes anymore, but the curriculum and the games and the professional development sort of has been kind of a place where it feels like there's leverage to make the kind of change that I am after, I guess. And that's really what it's been, is just trying another thing, saying, hey, what if we kickstart this board game? Will that make a difference? What if we write some riddles somewhere? Will that make a difference? And just trying and seeing how it's received. And just kind of keeping the eyes on the prize, but trying anything to see what'll help.
So Dan, something I have been meaning to ask is, over the years, I have come across your presence on the internet, specifically related to Math for Love, the blog, and then now the organization that you founded. And I've been intrigued from the beginning about the name Math for Love. What's the word love doing there? And how did you come up with the name?
Yeah, I think at some level, it is a reference to some advice I got when I was going to grad school, where somebody said to me, you really have to love it, because it will be so hard that if you don't love it, you just won't be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also a mix of the sharing of parties back in the day of, oh yeah, I do math. And people would always talk about how they hate math or the traumatic experiences they'd had around math. And if you say you love math, just this strange thing of, oh, math and love just don't go together. And I think I just wanted to put that really clearly together. The reason we do math is for the love of it. We do the math for love. And that best reason to show people to do it. And somehow what we need to be offering to people is a chance to fall in love with math. So early on, I felt like love was going to be a key part of this.
Well, what I love about that is, in some ways, somebody could say Math for Love. That sounds, corny, but it's a very bold and courageous name. There are all of these organizations out there that do math, and they name themselves the Mathnasium. They're trying to angle and maybe, do something that has a certain ring to it. What I love about the title Math for Love is it's straightforward, it's plain, and it's courageous. That's not what people normally think of. Math for Love. It inspired us to name this episode, Oh, for the Love of Math. That's what we're calling this.
Yeah, no, you guys are a great focus group. I love that.
Yeah, well, Noah and I have known each other for 30 years, and we have talked about math from the beginning. And I think we both harbor a love of mathematics in our own way. Noah has innovated with mathematics curriculum over the years as a teacher and now as a tech coach. He used to do this thing with his kids that he called Arnold denominator. And it was this fraction thing. And we have been silly about math. We love it. We tell totally lame dad jokes about math, and we do it unabashedly, right? No shame. We love it. That's how it is.
Yeah. I think that that's one of the great things about teaching is that you get to come to it. There's not just one right way to do it. You come and it's like a relationship that you're having with your students, and you have to bring yourself to it. And whoever you are, how you show up is what it is. But there is something about having it be unembarrassed, unashamed. There's this thing about the love and the clarity and the joy of this subject that I just feel should be right there in the front. And that was somehow my way of just saying hey, this is a big part of my life. If you can't share that with me, there's a part of my personality that you aren't getting. And it's
I love that. Yeah. That's
what I want to, be leading with. So I'm glad you guys like it.
So Dan, I think you've alluded to this a little bit already, just about the changing nature over time of Math for Love. It started as a blog. You were still in graduate school. Here you are now, 12 years later. I imagine a lot of change has happened.
Yeah.
Both it might have started as a passion project and now it's your career. Anything noteworthy in that journey that you want to share? How did you handle the evolution of this endeavor?
The change happened fast in a way, and there were always certain experiments that didn't work out and we had to let those go. And then there were other new ideas, and sometimes they would work out great. Sometimes they wouldn't work at all. And we've done so many strange things. We hosted a math art festival, or a math art show, excuse me. We've hosted a bunch of math festivals. We have done sort of a certain amount of online stuff versus in-person stuff. I think that the overall evolution has been towards trying to figure out how to have a larger and larger impact without losing what feels like it makes us special, I guess. And that's really hard. I think scaling without losing your edge is the trickiest part, I think. But I think right now we're maybe moving into the area of, rather than feeling like we need to host every teacher professional workshop ourselves, maybe being in the mode of, are there tools that we can provide that will allow other people to lead those workshops in a really powerful way? And they'll do it in their own way, but maybe we can still share some of the lessons that we've learned. Or are there things that we can give to parents at home that can just make it easier to share math in a playful way with their kids, and that it can happen at scale and not feel like we just have to meet each person one by one, but at the same time, not just say, oh, we'll just release an app and that'll magically change everything. What your relationships that's so fundamental to the work of changing people's mind about something like mathematics that it is very high touch. So that, I would say, is the overall evolution.
What you're describing, Dan, reminds me very much of some of the work that Joe Bowler is doing down here at Stanford with her U-Cubed program. Are you familiar with that at all?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, something Pete and I noticed is that there's some crossover between our mission here with our podcast at the Math Club, which is we want to make math more engaging and more accessible to more people, and the work that you're doing at Math for Love. Do you think you could tell us a little bit about Math for Love's goals and how you go about achieving them?
Yeah. And really, we are lucky to live in this time when there are so many people working on this problem and working in the same direction. And to be part of this vanguard that's really tackling it together is exciting. And that did not feel like how it was when I started in 2010, 2012. It felt much lonelier. And now, there's a lot of excitement, a lot of people working together. I would say the things that we're doing that I'm most excited right now about specifically are some of our games for young children, even preschool age kids. We have a game called Tiny Polka Dot, which is a math enriched card deck, which I'm just seeing have a kind of traction and make the kind of impact that I am so excited about, because it is giving kids a play-based approach to numbers from so early that they actually enter school with that. I'm really excited about that. We've got some visual multiplication flashcards, which I frankly didn't even think we'd ever do, but people kept asking for flashcards, and I just felt like we should at least design them well. And we paired with mathagon.org to make a physical version of them, which you can get, but Mathagon has a free online version. I think they've been used something like 70 million times at this point.
Wow.
This sense of like, this is great to see this kind of larger scale impact. We just licensed some new pattern block designs from Christopher Danielson and Nat Banting, two really great educators who are worth checking out. So those are fun. And then we also have an intervention curriculum, which is a play-based curriculum. And that's something that teachers do over the summer typically. But what we're finding is that's not just great for the kids, and it is, but it also has been a way to make a real difference with teachers, because they're able to try things out over the summer where it's a little bit of a lower stress time and a little bit of a better time to experiment. And they're getting to see, oh, using games in the classroom can really be effective. Using these kind of openers, these kind of rich tasks in the classroom can really work. And then bringing that into their school year teaching. And I'm excited about some of those things. I'm hoping that they'll continue to build up steam. And this kind of math change in perspective is just a massive problem. There's a huge amount of inertia. I just am hoping that if all of us are working on it in the way that we are best suited to, that we're going to start moving the needle more and more. And it feels like that maybe it's starting to happen.
I wish I had access to you and your resources when I was in the classroom, Dan. I would have eaten that up.
Well, I've got a 6-year-old, almost 7-year-old first grader at home, and I think I'm going to have to check out Tiny Polka Dot, because he thrives with play-based activities. Catching learning to play in a very deliberate way seems like it would really resonate with him. And I'm struck by his normal homework assignments, which are like packets of worksheets. And this is not to say that worksheets can't be an important part of one's educational plan and program, but I think having a balance there where worksheets feel like they would be really well suited to a number of students, but maybe not all of them. I'm specifically wondering about my own kiddo here. Like, is this the right direction for him all the time? But having an alternative, it's like you're saying, can we give teachers a taste of this that they might then think, I could do this in the classroom. I mean, I'm not going to replace wholesale what I've been doing over the years, but this could be a growth for me, like in some new direction.
When I work with teachers, what I try to do in my first session with them is share an experience which is so beautiful and so empowering that by the end of the first session, I want them to be asking, why didn't I learn it this way?
Right.
And then the next question is, well, could I do this with my students? And you're right. It is complicated and there's a lot of other things going on, and worksheets aren't necessarily bad, but
right.
But we do want a sense of what is possible. And I think, especially for young kids, play is the natural way kids learn. And I have literally been in classrooms where I'm about to go in and the teacher says, okay, it's time to stop having fun and do math. And that's a hard introduction right there. And it just doesn't have to be like that. We could be having fun and
doing math.
Any of the learning, it actually supports the learning. We're going to learn more. We're going to learn more deeply. We're going to learn more rigorously, more meaningfully. So, yeah.
Well, and you guys write something on your website about the idea here is that you are working to explore mathematics in its full context and to somehow leave out the playfulness, the beauty of it, the romance of it. To leave that out is to say, we're giving you a partial mathematics. And so there may be a time and place for worksheets. And you and I both know that there's a time and a place to just stare at the wall, bang your head, look at this, this dense textbook or whatever paper that we're trying to parse.
Totally.
There's a time for that too. But I love this idea when you say, hey, let's see, you're a kid, playing comes naturally to you. It seems to, put you in an absorption mindset. You're just in it and absorbing everything around you. Let's get some math in there then.
Yeah. And in a way, so part of what we're doing, and this is, I guess, maybe the thing that I am so excited about, is trying to create these contexts that are invitations to play with mathematics.
Yeah.
Like if you think about certain kinds of practice, like the worksheets, they are like practicing your scales in music. And as you say, that's really important. If you want to do music, at some point, you've got to practice your scales, and that's got to be part of your process. But if the only music you ever hear is somebody practicing scales, and you're never allowed to like just mess around on a piano, and that's all you ever do, you don't think that music is for you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just like, right. So that's why we have a larger context. And that's why we share the beautiful pieces that we know. And that's why we tell the stories of the composers and what was interesting about their life and why this lit up their life. This sense of the romance and the beauty and the power and the meaning, those are all things that in the whole context, people can see if there's something that grabs them. And I just want people to have the shot to be like, oh yeah, there is something in here that I really resonate with. And
not once in the 50 minutes that we've been on the call have any one of the three of us talked about math in terms of its usefulness. And even when you can let go of I don't really like this, but it's so useful. That's another misconception that people have about mathematics, that it's something that you might despise and it's okay if you don't like it. And that really the only use for it is that it can solve problems that are important, I guess, to engineers. And it does that. It certainly does do that. But at the same time, it opens up these spaces of being that remind me much more of art and music and poetry than a recipe for building like a flux capacitor.
I mean, it's almost like if you had to make something up that would just be like the most amazing thing that everyone would want to do, right? It's like, there's a field that like, it's really about play and interest and just exploring and kind of messing around with these rules and seeing what'll happen and shapes and wonder. Oh, and by the way, if you get really good at it, it also helps you like do science and computer stuff and like describes the world and is like crazy useful. But don't even worry about that now. We're just going to have fun with it. And it is crazy that it does all of it. And I feel like I just saw somebody say something like you either get good at math or work for somebody who's good at math. I don't know if it's math. But there is, I think, this sense, and maybe there's a misconception that students will classically say, when am I ever going to use this? And there's a feeling, if you're a teacher, that you have to answer this question. Like, well, someday maybe you'll want to be an architect and you'll need to know how to, find the sine of an angle or something.
Right. And can we really say it's the best use of my time as an educator when I have limited time? I mean, every teacher will tell you that the resource they need more of is time.
Yeah.
Am I really teaching this lesson to 30 kids because maybe one day one of them is going to choose to be an architect?
Right. But the question is not, when am I going to use this someday? It's how is there space for me in this right now? Like, why am I doing this right now? And I think
I love that distinction, Dan.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
And sometimes it's not, this will be useful in the future. That's not really what students care about. It means something to me now. It feels motivating to me now. And
right.
Students, it's totally not the application that is the thing that draws them in.
So Dan, what's next for Math for Love? Or more generally, what's on the horizon for you and this super interesting journey that you're on?
Well, there's been a kind of codifying a lot of our earlier stuff and saying like, okay, the curriculum feels like it's done now and all these games are out there. Probably the next step is to keep producing some more games that we feel like will keep filling some of these gaps and will give some more opportunities for playing around. We have one coming up for like 3 and 4 and up. So preschool kids again. In fact, this is maybe the first place I'm announcing it, called Roly Poly, that we're hoping to bring out in early 2023, which is about like counting and movement, which I think will be really, really fun. I have a 1 and a 3-year-old right now, but I just wrote a little kids book on patterns called Pattern Breakers and going to be publishing that in early 2023. So yeah, just trying more stuff, I guess, more games, the possibility of more books and other things, and then just reaching out with more, just more projects, more partnerships, whatever I
scaling.
Like it'll help.
Yeah. I just want to compliment you on the naming of your materials. I think Prime Climb is a wonderful name. I love the fact that it rhymes and I love the way it connects to the game itself. Tiny Polka Dot is probably one of the cutest names I've heard in a very long time, but Roly Poly has got to be a close second, if not tied. Those are such adorable names. And Pete, have you heard the name Noah King? Yeah, that's much less. Well, you and I will talk about that one later, but, who's not going to feel invited in by that name, Tiny Polka Dot? Ever since I first saw it online, I thought, that wins a cute award right there.
And we put a lot of work into these names actually, and it is a pet peeve of mine that any math game feels like it has to have math in the title somehow. Like it needs to warn people that this is about math, kind of like
Algebra Blaster.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, can we just have a game that invites people to play it as opposed to saying like, hey, like math warning sign flashing on this one.
Danger, Will Robinson. Danger. No, Will Robinson. Danger.
I remember one of my favorite math games from way, way back when I was a brand new teacher. So this is back in the mid to late 90s. Was a game called the 24 game. They did not put any effort into making an adorable name for it at all. But do you guys know that game?
Oh, sure. That game's still around. And that game actually, we've been experimenting around for more years than I would like to admit, actually, about kind of playing with some of the same mechanics of that game, which is you have 4 numbers and you're trying to make 24 using arithmetic. But we've been really working on a version of that won't have a time pressure mechanic. And yeah, it's interesting because that's a game I really like, but I'm also aware that some kids in the speed-based version of it can get turned off. So I'd love to.
Totally. Have you thought about reaching out to Kiefer Sutherland on that? Because I think if you could get him to the 24 game, I mean, that's a winning combo.
Would you even try and play that game with me?
You're right. The cross-banding I am admittedly weak on, and that is something I should really think about more.
Dan, thanks so much for coming and talking with us about Prime Climb, about Math for Love. Before you go, I don't know if Pete told you this, but every now and then on the Math Club, we like to end an episode by giving our listeners a puzzle to kind of chew on for a couple of weeks, and then we'll talk about it in the next episode. Do you have a particularly favorite puzzle that you might have at your fingertips that you would like to share and that we could then talk about in our next episode?
Yeah, I'd be happy to share one. And this is sort of a sideline for me, is making puzzles. And on my website, there's a bunch of the puzzles that I've done as TED Ed riddles that are there for free. So people can check those out. But I actually faced this one as a 9th grader getting into a math camp. This was part of the Hampshire College Summer Studies in Mathematics interesting test that they would give. It was a 4-question, 3-hour test. And this was the first question one year that I happened to be applying. And the question's really simple, which is, with a fair coin, so a coin that has a 50-50 chance of being heads or tails, design a game that you have a 1 in 3 chance of winning. And what is interesting to me about this and the experience I had is there's actually a really clever little solution to this that's quite slick, and that if you get it, you can just be like, okay, I got it, and you move on. And I did not get that slick solution and ended up working for hours on this puzzle. And because I worked so long on it, I ended up finding more about it than I would have had I known the slick solution too early. It's kind of this classic thing that the answer can diffuse your interest and actually like close it off before it's really done. And it actually was a problem I ended up coming back to for years and having more and more insights into. And over the years, I've heard dozens of different answers to games that people have created with a fair coin. And you kind of want honest games, where it's like you could draw 3 regions on the floor and toss the coin into them. But we want to really like use the coinness of the coin, ideally.
So you're telling me that my solution of hiding the coin behind one of 3 doors and then making you guess which one is behind is not a valid solution?
You always have to decide, like, are you fully satisfied with that as a solution? It's a nice lateral idea, but right, there are ways to do it that just rely on the coininess involved in the
coininess. Just the flippity floppity.
The extra credit, or the second part to this, was now design a game that you have a 1 in pi chance of winning. That's one that the slick solution no longer works for, and you have to unpack in the weirdness of it. And yeah, so the 1 in 3 is really my riddle, but it turns out that a lot is possible with this kind of functionality. Very interesting.
That is a really fun puzzle. And Math Club, the challenge is in your court. You have 2 weeks now to think about it. If you think you come up with the slick solution or any solution, please let us know. We've set up a special Google form to accept your answers, and you can find that at bit.ly/mathclubpodcast-puzzle2. So that's bit.ly/mathclubpodcast-puzzle2. And whoever submits a valid solution first will get a special shout out on our next episode. Dan, do you want to tell folks how they can find you online if they are interested in learning more about you and Math for Love?
Yeah, absolutely. The best way to reach me is at mathforlove.com, which is my website, and you can find a ton of stuff. And there's a free lesson library for teachers and a puzzle page for people who are interested in puzzles and riddles and the games and a bunch of other stuff, the blog, etc. I'm also on Twitter at mathforlove, and I'm at a bunch of other places too, Instagram and LinkedIn, and you can find me in all of those places. I basically have at Math for Love wherever I could get it. So feel free to check me out. But those are the best places to reach me in general. And yeah, I'm always interested in people reaching out.
Dan, it's been so great touching base with you, checking in after a number of years. I'm really excited for you, the work that you're doing over at Math for Love. Really important and impressive and fun. So just thank you so much for being on our show.
What a pleasure. And so good to hear from you, Pete, and great to meet you, Noah. Yeah, I really enjoyed talking to you guys.
Pleasure to meet you too, Dan. And I just want to say thank you as well. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a fascinating conversation. Pete, do you want to tell our listeners how they can find us online if they want to suggest future episode topics or ask questions?
Yeah, absolutely. For that and anything else related to the Math Club, you can find us on Twitter. Our handle is at Math Club Podcast. You can also send us an email. Our address is mathclubpodcast@gmail.com. All right. Thanks again, Dan, and everybody in the Math Club. We will see you next time. Bye, everybody.